Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah, amma ba'd. Inshallah, today we start talking about Tawakul. And again, these are concepts we discussed before, but we'll discuss them again to refresh our minds, and perhaps we get a little bit more information that we may not have discussed when we spoke about it whenever we did. So today we're talking about, inshallah, Tawakul. And we know what Tawakul is. It's a concept, this idea of depending on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And it's a huge concept in Islam, to the extent that Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala literally says that all of Iman and excellence, all of Iman and Ihsan are built on Tawakkul. Which, to be honest, I mean, when you think about it just for a little bit, it makes sense. Just take the common example of sadaqah. Right? When you give sadaqah, right, it demands that you sacrifice. And what are you sacrificing? You're sacrificing something that is perceived by us as necessary for our well-being. On top of that, it's a huge desire, right? So in order to even fathom, even to begin to entertain the idea of sacrificing something that has that much status in one's mind, or that much importance in one's mind and heart, then there needs to be a logical reason behind it. Now, for the Muslim, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us to give sadaqah just for the purpose of pleasing Him and for reward, right? But it will go beyond that and address the concern of the human being, and that is loss of money, right? What do I do if I need this money? Right? Islam comes and addresses it, and what does Allah say? Whatever you spend, He replaces it. Right? So in order to succeed in giving sadaqah, there has to be an amount of tawakkul. There has to. Now, if somebody's giving sadaqah for personal gain, to open doors for themselves, which is not unheard of, that's a different story. Now it's no longer sadaqah. This is a business transaction, right? It's an investment. People come and say, why would billionaires don't care about big homes?
Good. I'm going to be coming a little late. It's going to be late, like a couple hours by the time I get there.
Right. So billionaires aren't interested in big, lavish things. What do they need a $200 million home for? What do they need a $100 million yacht for? They don't need these things, but still buy it. Yeah. Why? Because they use those things to invite people, and in the gathering, they build relationships. You see? So the idea is they're not purchasing a liability. They're purchasing an asset that's going to make them money, one way or another, right? But for somebody who's truly giving sadaqah, I am sacrificing this. There has to be an amount of tawakkul, or else we would never do it, right? So that's one example. What about praying? Let's say you have to pray in public. That requires an amount of tawakkul. I have to depend on Allah that He's going to protect me from some crazy person, right? What about raising kids? that requires a lot of tawakkul. Just the fact of the matter. Okay. So tawakkul is so essential to the Muslim experience that it's literally impossible to imagine a successful Muslim who does not have an amount of tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Furthermore, the more a person is able to build healthy tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more they'll be able to build proper and healthy iman. Now Ibn Qayyim rahmatullah goes and he starts having a conversation with some statements of scholars of tazkiyah and whatnot. We're not going to get into that in terms of our conversation today, but I'll try and just extrapolate the main points. To show us the importance of tawakkul, Ibn Qayyim rahmatullah references several verses that pairs tawakkul with iman. Right? It pairs tawakkul with ibadah. If we were created to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, of course we say ibadah in its comprehensive understanding or meaning of the term. And now Allah is pairing tawakkul with that. It's telling us that this is incredibly important to our experience as believers. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. It is you alone we worship, and it is you alone we seek help from. Well, what does seeking help from Allah mean? I'm depending on Allah. I need Allah to get this to succeed for whatever it is. Right? And if I'm not ready to depend on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then why would I ask Him for help? It doesn't really make any sense. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also says, وَمَا تَوْفِيقِي إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ تَوَكَّلْتُ وَإِلَيْهِ أُنِيبُ. Right? This is the statement of Shu'aib alayhi salam, when he says that I depend on Allah and I go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, using inaba, and we know inaba and tawbah and the role that this concept plays, so pairing the two. In another verse, رَبَّنَا عَلَيْكَ تَوَكَّلْنَا وَإِلَيْكَ أَنَبْنَا وَإِلَيْكَ الْمَصِيرُ. It is you who we depend on, it is you who we go back to, and it is you who we return to. Another verse, وَاذْكُرِ اسْمَ رَبِّكَ وَتَبَتَّلْ إِلَيْهِ تَبْتِيلًا رَبُّ الْمَشْرِقِ وَالْمَغْرِبِ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا هُوَ فَاتَّخِذْهُ وَكِيلًا. These two verses in Surah Al-Muzammil, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us to do dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to worship Him, and then says, take Him as your wakil. Now, this verse is very beautiful because it's kind of giving us three pieces of the equation. It says, Rabbul Mashriqi wal Maghrib. That's the first piece. La ilaha illahu is the second piece. Fattakhidhu wakila is the third piece. And there's a type of order here. So Allah tells the Prophet, ﷺ, tells the reader, He is the Lord of the East and the West. By Lord, it means the caretaker. He's the one taking care of the East, and He's the one taking care of the West. In other words, go outside. Look to the East, observe. What do you see? Look to the West, observe. What do you see? You see order. You see things being taken care of. You see things, everything's intertwined, fitting together. You can rely on the sun rising as you can rely on it setting. You can rely on the moon, right, going in its normal phases. You can rely on the trees to provide its produce. You can rely on these things, right? Okay, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us He is the caretaker of all of that. And it's all in unison. If you can see this, then La ilaha illahu. Is there another God besides Allah? Is there another God besides Allah? Of course not. Right, the East and the West is communicating Allah's oneness, subhanahu. And if Allah is the one who's taking care of all of this, and He's showing us His authority over all of this, then should we not take Him as our wakil, as the one who we depend on, subhanahu. Right? And there are other verses, not to go through them all, where it combines tawakkul with guidance, tawakkul with taqwa, tawakkul with other critical aspects of our iman. So tawakkul is absolutely huge. But what is tawakkul, right? It's easy to talk about, but difficult to actually apply. It's easy to say depend on Allah because He is the provider, He is this and He is that, right? And it's always easier to say than to apply. But how can we begin to apply it? Well, if we were to translate tawakkul as depend on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, let's just take basic human psychology, basic human relationships. Who do you depend on in your life? Who do you depend on? It could be a spouse, it could be a son, it could be a father, it could be a brother, it could be whoever. Right? Okay. Now my next question is, why do you depend on them?
Because you've built up a relationship of interdependence, I guess.
Right. You depend on them because there has to be something that has shown you that either you need something from them, so you depend on them, or that they can help you with what you need, so you depend on them. In other words, to put differently, you depend on somebody after they have shown you that you can depend on them. Right? After they have shown you, not told you. Some random person comes to you and says, hey, you can trust me. No. Maybe I can, maybe I can't. But right now, we're not at that point. You can rely on me. Yeah. Can I? There's this phenomenon of people working at a job for a few months, quitting, go to another job, just job hopping.
Yeah.
Right? Back in the previous generations, a person stuck with their job literally the entire life. It's one job. My father had one profession. That's it. He started the first professional job he ever had is the same company he retired from after 40 plus years, right? This was normal.
Yeah.
Now it's just hopping and hopping and hopping. By the time a person hits their 30s, they've been to 17 different companies. Professional. I'm not talking about they worked at McDonald's and then they worked at this place and then no. I'm talking about professional corporate jobs.
Yeah.
And one person was analyzing this, saying that that's going to backfire. Why? People aren't going to hire you. How come? How do I know I can rely on you? You've never been long enough in a company to have gone through the ups and downs. It's easy to be a good employee when things are good, but what happens when things are down? I need to know what you're going to do when you're here, right? So you can't just tell somebody, it's not lip service, you can't just tell somebody, trust me, depend on me. You have to show them. You have to show them. And so I don't think it's effective, I should say, when people give talks about tawakkul. This is how you have tawakkul on Allah. No, that's not how it works. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showed Musa why he should depend on him. And that is through literally his entire life. This happened to you, I helped you. That happened to you, I helped you. That happened to you, I sent you this. That happened to you, I sent you that. Now go to Fir'aun. As I've been there with you every single time, sending you things, sending you people to take care of you, to protect you, now I'm telling you, go to Fir'aun, and I'm telling you, as I did that before, I'm going to do in the future. And even then, he was scared. Alayhi salam. Right? It wasn't until literally the last moment, the last encounter he had with Fir'aun, where that fear aspect was at a minimum. Right? When the sea was in front of him, Fir'aun was behind him, and his people are saying they're going to catch up, we're done. Musa, at that point, he reached a level of tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to where he didn't even hesitate. He said, Allah, He's going to guide me. And immediately the answer came. Right? So, this is how you build tawakkul. It is when your heart finds peace with the fact that Allah is in control. You find it advantageous to say, oh Allah, you take care of this for me. Oh Allah, you choose for me. Of course, you have to do your part, right? But the idea is, while you do your part, to you, you're not, I want A and I don't want B. I think A is a better choice for me. I'm going to go ahead and pursue that. But oh Allah, you know which choice is better, so you go ahead and set everything up. I'm just going to do what I'm responsible for. Right? And then the rest is on you.
So it's not like you leave it to Allah to choose for you. You choose and then you pray that.
You choose when you have the ability to choose. If I'm between two jobs, I have the responsibility to determine which of the two is better for me. Right? But then, if I determine that A is better for me, I say, oh Allah, I think A is better for me, but you know what's best, and you go ahead and decide for me. I'm just doing what I need to do. There are other times where things are out of your hands, right? You can't do anything about it. Here you say, oh Allah, do what you want. So you have the feeling of peace. You're at peace with the fact that Allah is in control. You see as advantageous when Allah chooses for you, and you are content with Allah's decisions for you. Now, interestingly enough, in our times today, one of the major problems that people are facing is anxiety. But anxiety can come from different reasons, right? For example, a person can develop anxiety due to stress, pressure at work, right? Or they have certain, let's say they're the claustrophobic. Tight, small spaces makes them anxious, right? But what we're finding is that the current wave of anxiety that we find in young people has to do with this feeling of the anxiety towards that which is not certain. Lack of certainty. Right? And it's very interesting because you can understand why. We have created such an organized society and way of living that we have become like robots, so to speak. I don't mean that in a derogatory, negative way or anything like that. I'm just saying our lives have become so routine, so organized, so predictable that as soon as a bump in the road happens, it's like, oh my God, what do I do? How can I? People have developed anxiety when they don't feel like they are in control of literally every single thing. Now, back in the day, back before all these technologies, literally most of life was unpredictable. Right? When they were talking about Hurricane Hillary and Tropical Storm Hillary and whatnot, they said the only other time in recorded history something like this has happened was in 1938, I believe, something like that. And documents and records show that it just came like out of nowhere. They had no idea this was coming. Well, yeah, they had no idea because they didn't have the technologies to know. So can you imagine? You're living life. You have no idea if it's going to rain tomorrow. There could be a severe storm coming, and you have no idea. In our times today, literally hour by hour, 5 days in advance. Well, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. Something wrong with these technologies, but the idea is, right, it comes at a cost. And the solution to that is not by saying we don't want technology. It's not the solution. This is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah allowed us to reach this level of knowledge. The idea is you have to balance it out by creating for yourself certain times where you are in unpredictable scenarios. This is why people who talk about parenting, who talk about relationship building, who talk about building oneself and self-development, camping is like a top activity in self-development and relationship building and parenting. Why? Well, because when you're camping, it's unpredictable. So it's not about living life that way every single day, but every now and then really getting yourself out and saying, you know what? Let's see what happens. Letting your children feel like, there's an uncontrolled environment. They say men are suffering these days in the West. Well, one of the reasons is because men, I think, thrive more in uncontrolled circumstances, in uncontrolled environments. Men better develop when you put them out in the wild and they have to figure things out. Right? And we see that women do much better in school. Well, maybe that's because women thrive more in controlled environments. That could be the case. It's not that one is better than the other because of this. Let's be clear here. The West is going to come and say, "Oh, you think men are? You're suggesting that men are better because they are better in uncontrolled." No. Why does it have to be better? Or why does it have to be a competition? It just is, right? It's just a difference. Yeah. It doesn't make one better than the other. But the idea is we better understand what's going on. Anyway, going back to the point here, that we begin to understand our level of tawakkul on Allah based on how our heart and our emotions respond to uncertainties. If you are in a situation where you don't know what the outcome is going to be, yet you find a type of peace with that. I don't mean you don't feel any stress. People go gray for a reason, right? I don't mean you don't find any stress in that, but while you endure it, your heart is at peace with what Allah is going to lay out for you. You're content with whatever is going to happen, or when it happens, you're content with that, and you're perfectly comfortable saying, "Ya Rabb, you see the situation I'm in. It's in your hands. Guide me to that which is best." That's how you gauge it. But somebody who has no tawakkul on Allah, who doesn't even understand Allah's relevance in their day-to-day affairs, you can imagine and you can see why they fall into anxiety. When you're looking at two scenarios where literally one of the scenarios means tremendous difficulty for a person, and you're staring this in the face, if you don't have this counterbalance of saying, well, whatever happens, even if B, which is horrific to me, if B happens, Allah will somehow bring something out of it, won't He? This is how the Muslim thinks, but if you don't have that, what are you going to feel? You're going to feel absolutely dreadful, right? So tawakkul is an action of the heart, or at least it begins as an action of the heart. And it is something that you learn, right? You don't just have. Tawakkul is a skill, like patience is a skill, like forgiveness is a skill. Nobody is born with, a perfected ability to enact these things. Yeah, sure, maybe certain young ones will learn certain traits where they have an inclination to these things, right? But the idea is they learned it. So it's an action of the heart that needs to be learned. How do we learn it, right? Well, one, and this is in no order, but these are certain things that we need to become comfortable with, we need to learn. One thing Ibn Qayyim rahmatullahi alayhi mentions is that al-kifaya, which is you have what you need. In order to truly be dependent, to build tawakkul on Allah, you need to be content with your needs, like the basics, right? Why? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us, and being His creation promises to provide us. Many verses in the Quran, He will provide you, right? He will provide you, He will provide you. That's true. But He doesn't say what exactly He's going to provide you with, or at least how much He's going to provide you with. In our minds, however, in the average American's mind, if you say God will provide you, what comes to their mind? Right? Not just money. How much? It's definitely not a basic salary. You see what I mean here? Allah will provide you with a car. He's going to give you money. He's going to provide you with enough to buy a car. What kind of car? In our minds, it's like, yeah, Allah's going to provide enough to buy me the latest Mercedes. Is that really Allah's promise? That's not His promise. He might give that to you, right? But His promise is to provide you enough to live, to have enough to live life. Just the basics, right? If that's in our mind, you can see how tawakkul is easier for such a person than somebody who thinks that Allah is going to provide them above and beyond what He has promised. So you look at these young ones who feel like, yeah, I need the latest phone. And the parents know, no, you don't need the latest phone. Your phone is just fine. You have an iPhone 12, going up to a 15 isn't going to change much. You don't need that, right? No, I do need it. I need it. And if you don't get it to me, then you're neglecting my needs. You see how their reaction is, their behaviors are? When you say no, what's their reaction? It's frustration, it is anger, right? It is disobedience, it's a type of rebellion. Versus a child who, you know what? Yeah, I understand what my parents are saying. I don't need an iPhone 15. I can ask. Can I have an iPhone 15? No, don't worry about it. No, you don't need it right now. Okay. That's it. You see what I'm getting at here? Does that make sense? Yes, no? I feel like there's a hesitation.
I don't know. I think it depends on the child. Like if he's not in an environment where everyone's getting a 15 and he's not, then I don't know how happy he's going to be with that answer. Because
What I'm
the environment has become such that
That's the point I'm getting at.
That is
The environment has become where, the iPhone 15 is something you need to have. But no, you don't need to have that. That's a misunderstanding. So Ibn Qayyim rahmatullah alayhi says that you have to pair tawakkul with kifaya, with the basic needs of life. Because if you don't pair it with the basics, Allah says He's going to give you what you need. Now your expectations are above reality. The child's expectations are above reality, so when the parent says no, what happens? The reaction, right? The anger, the frustration, the feeling of I'm being neglected, my parents don't love me. Where is that coming from? It's coming from their misunderstanding that this is something they need. You see what I mean here? But a child who understands that I don't need an iPhone 15, and the parent then says, no, we're not going to get you an iPhone 15, what's their reaction going to be? Okay. That's it. They're not going to have that negative reaction. You see why? Because their understanding of reality is on par with what reality actually is. Right? So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He's going to provide us, He's going to protect us, if you don't understand what Allah is actually promising, your understanding or your belief is higher, more than what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, then that's where the lack of tawakkul comes from. Right? So, just to be clear here, what I'm saying is we need to learn about Allah and what He provides us, how He protects us, in order to develop an accurate understanding of reality. That doesn't mean, however, we cannot want more from Allah. If you want more from Allah, then that goes to the concept of raja, hope in Allah. Right? You see what I mean here? So have tawakkul on Allah while also having hope in Allah that He'll give you more than simply what He promises. Right? Just to make that clear. I'm not saying live life only expecting the necessities and never aspiring towards anything beyond that. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying here is when you aspire for more, now you get into the realm of raja. You practice raja, hope in Allah. That goes beyond tawakkul. These are two separate things now. Alright, am I losing you all? Does that make sense? I don't know. Zoom, what do you think?
So if you are looking for more than your basic needs, and you end up with less than what you're looking for, then tawakkul is acceptance of getting less.
Yeah, so that's not what I'm trying to say, but that's true though, right? What I'm saying is, going back to the example of the child who gets mad and angry and start accusing the parents, so you hate me, you neglect me for not getting them an iPhone 15. That anger, what is that really a reaction to? Why are they behaving this way? Why is child A behaving this way when you say no, but child B is not behaving that way? What's the difference? The difference is expectations. What do I expect from my parents? What is my parents' role in my life? Are my parents there to buy me iPhones? Or are they there to help me grow and to become independent? And an iPhone has nothing to do with that. Right? Allah created us to be people of the afterlife, not to be people of this life. Allah created us so that we are eternally in paradise, not eternally here. So to Allah, homes and houses and cars and luxuries and money don't matter. Why? Because that's not the purpose. Right? So His lordship over us, His caring of us, is primarily around our iman. Right? And so iman takes precedence over worldly commodities. Once we understand this, it's easier for us to have tawakkul on Allah. So you have somebody who is going through poverty and they're content. And somebody who has millions upon millions and they're not content. Why? Because the one in poverty understands my life isn't here. So I understand why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala isn't giving me what He has given the kuffar. Because it doesn't make or break my place in the afterlife. So it's easy to have tawakkul then. See what I mean here?
One more point. I think with tawakkul, faith also come on Allah. Because like parents, you are saying like this iPhone 15. So if your child know this thing, that my parents or my mother, she thinks best for me, like if they know that you always need something best for them. So if we do tawakkul on Allah, it get easy. If we think, okay, if we didn't get something big or whatever you wish, this thing, no, He knows the best, what's good for me.
Sure, right?
So this makes easy for you or for the children that when you have this faith that there is someone who knows the best.
Correct. How does the child learn?
Also usually, if they know that yes, my parents or my mother, she loves me so much that she knows what's good for me or what's not
Okay,
good for
right.
me.
But that's exactly the point. When does the child know that my parents are actually acting in my best interest?
Yeah.
Right? When does that happen? It doesn't happen overnight. It happens with time as the child grows and sees, wait a minute, my parents have been acting in my best interest the entire time. And why does it happen over time and they don't know when they're young? Because they don't understand life.
Yes.
They don't understand what is really in my best interest. Right? But later, once they hit their 30s, once they hit their 40s, right, that's when they realize, wow, my parents really were acting in my best interest. That's the key point here when it comes to tawakkul. You cannot tell somebody, trust Allah because He is Allah, and expect them to have proper tawakkul. It's not that point isn't true. Clearly, obviously Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is worthy of depending on because He is Allah. But human beings require an amount of, exposure in order for that tawakkul to really fall in the heart. No Muslim is going to come out and say, I don't think I should have tawakkul on Allah. No Muslims come out and say, I disagree that, putting our tawakkul in Allah is a good thing. It's easy to claim. Nobody's going to deny that. But the question is, how does that really enter our heart? Because when push comes to shove, people are reacting very differently to qadar. Why does some person who's living in total misery, in the worst of situations, find reason to say Alhamdulillah for this piece of stale bread, while somebody who has dozens of different plates in front of them find it difficult to say Alhamdulillah? Why? Right? So that's the crux of the matter here. It's not that one believes that Allah is providing me this and the other doesn't. They both believe Allah is the provider, but the relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is at different levels. And as I was saying, you need to learn how to have tawakkul on Allah, and that requires certain things. One thing is understanding what Allah really promises you, so that we know what to expect from Allah. If a person believes that Allah needs to answer all of their dua, they're in for a surprise. If they believe that I can just put my hands up in the air and say, oh Allah, please provide me with a Ferrari, and they think it's going to happen, they're in for a surprise. That is not what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling them. Right? So that's the idea here. When we have a correct understanding of Allah, we will develop accurate expectations, or what we should expect from Allah. Right? And that's also very important to the health of our iman, in the sense that if Allah provides me more than the basic promise, then that is fadlullah. That is Allah's blessing upon me. It's not because I deserved it. Right? So that's the first point. Another point, when it comes to tawakkul, is that you cannot develop real tawakkul on Allah without going through difficulty. You have to go through difficulty. Right? You have to. Who had the most tawakkul on Allah? The Prophet ﷺ. Why? Just because? No, because he went through every single possible scenario a person can imagine. And Allah showed him the results of all of those scenarios. Hence, when Hudaybiyah happened, right, and the companions were going to do Umrah, and they were stopped, and they were turned back, the Prophet ﷺ, he was unhinged. Is that the right word? No, it's not the right. He was unfazed. He was unfazed. Why? Because he understood how to have tawakkul on Allah. That Allah prevented them from going for a reason. Abu Bakr also understood this. The rest of the companions didn't. Even Umar radiallahu ta'ala an, his reaction was very aggressive. Ya Rasulullah, lasna ala al-haq. Aren't we on the truth? Aren't we stronger than them? He actually started mounting a type of, he started arousing the other companions. And Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala an told him, Umar, relax, calm down. And it actually got pretty concerning. The Prophet ﷺ would tell them, they wouldn't listen. Then he went to his wife, I believe it was Salama, if I'm not mistaken, or Maymuna, radiallahu ta'ala anhuma. And the Prophet said, I don't know what to do with these people. He said, she told him, go outside and just start shaving your head, and they'll follow you. He did that. He went outside, he called his barber, started shaving his head. All the other companions started shaving, and they went back. Right? And then right as they were going back, Allah reveals the verses, Inna fatahna laka fathan mubina. The treaties of Hudaybiyah was a major victory for the believers. And Umar went to the Prophet and said, Ya Rasulullah, awa fathun hadha? Is this really a victory? He said, yes. The Prophet understood why, because of the training, because of all that he went through. Musa alayhi salam, when he was by the sea, he said, Allah will make me a way out. He didn't hesitate. Why? Because he saw all the other times Allah has made a way out for him. It became rooted in him. You see what I mean here? So a person cannot develop true tawakkul on Allah until they go through difficulties. Because it's in those difficulties Allah will show you how He organizes your life, how He takes care of you. He will show you how from the very thing you believe is your harm, is your stress, the source of your agony, from that very thing will come prosperity, will come your victory, will come your alleviation. Lut alayhi salam, in the most difficult moment, or what seems to be the most difficult moment in his life, when the entire village came and surrounded his home. Why? Because they heard he has 3 guests. All of this is happening, why? Because of those 3 guests, wasn't it? But it turned out that those 3 guests were the way out for him. So when Allah shows you that, what happens to one's trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Right? It strengthens, it increases when you actually see it. So that's another factor there. A third factor of tawakkul is that you actually do what you're required to do. Yes, that is part of tawakkul on Allah. A lot of people get tawakkul wrong in thinking that tawakkul is just sitting back and letting Allah do things. Again, there might be scenarios where your hands are tied. There's nothing you can do. Right? You're forced in a corner. There's nothing that you can do to deal with the situation. There we say, it's in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and there's nothing we can do. Other than that, a critical aspect of having tawakkul on Allah is taking the means towards your goal. Why is that part of tawakkul on Allah? Well, because Allah created the universe in a way where you do things to get results. You do things to get results. And so if I truly depend on Allah, if I truly trust Allah, then I will do the things that He has given me in order to reach my goals. Isn't that trust? An example, a child wants to become an engineer, whatever, goes to his parents or her parents and says, I want to become an engineer. Okay, no problem. Let me show you how. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. If the child looks at those 5 steps and says, I'm going to do it my own way, what is that saying about the child's trust in the advice of their parents? It's not really there. But if they look at it and say, okay, I'm going to apply it step by step, what does that say about their trust in their parents? They trust their parents. That's why they're taking the advice. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, He comes and He says He created everything. And He created it in ways where you can reach your goals by doing certain things. When you actually do them, you are trusting Allah and what He has said. Right? And this is why, by the way, anybody who works hard and smart is going to find what? What are the results of that going to be? Some form of success. Even a disbeliever. Why? Is Allah giving them from His mercy? Is He giving them because they had tawakkul on Allah? No, He's giving them from His adil, His justice. Because His justice has created the rule where if you work hard, you get results. Right? So in order to have trust in Allah, you must learn how to get things done. And you must do it. And you must throw yourself in the discomfort zone, as they say. And you will learn. And Allah will help you. And Allah will assist you. And He will throw things your way to make your life a little bit easier. And when you start making wrong mistakes, He will turn you back to the right choices, etc. So that's also another important part of tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that reminds me of the hadith of the Bedouin, very well-known hadith, you should probably remember it, where the Bedouin came to the Prophet ﷺ, or a companion came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, Ya Rasulullah, should I tie my camel or should I just have tawakkul on Allah? Right? Again, the mistake. A lot of people view it as either or. Either you depend on yourself by doing these things, or you depend on Allah by not doing those things. No, the Prophet ﷺ said what? Tie the camel and depend on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because Allah created the system where if you tie your camel, it's not going to run away. Unless you tie it bad. It's a different story. Now there are 2 types of tawakkul. Tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in acquiring your worldly provisions. Right? Tawakkul on Allah in getting a job, tawakkul on Allah in passing your exams, tawakkul on Allah in starting a business, tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in hiring an employee. All of that, there is a lot of uncertainties there. Right? So that's one type of tawakkul. The other type of tawakkul is having tawakkul on Allah and pleasing Him. Right? Let me repeat that. Having tawakkul on Allah and pleasing Him, or depending on Allah to succeed in pleasing Him. You know, I'm guessing 99.999% of Muslims have never even thought of this. Because we always view tawakkul in accordance to what? Our worldly stuff. And that's true. That's a type of ibadah, right? But there's a higher form of tawakkul. That is having tawakkul on Allah when it comes to your iman. If you remember last time, we were talking about how, I was mentioning how when you really think of the vulnerability of the human being and all that's going on, we feel doomed. There's no way I can succeed here. No way. Right? And then I mentioned how, that feeling right there is a gift. Why? Because if you feel helpless in of yourself, then you will automatically turn to a source that can actually help you. To the believer, that is Allah. So by feeling vulnerable and weak and helpless, you are widening the gates to entering upon Allah through tawakkul. If I know my iman is so vulnerable, my heart is so volatile, constantly changing, in a moment's time I can be misguided. By my own actions I can be misguided. And the list goes on. It's an endless list. If I feel this, then I am preparing myself to put my tawakkul in Allah in terms of preserving my iman. Ya Rabbi, I'm trying to do what you require me to do. Beyond that, these uncertainties, these elements that I do not control, like my heart, I depend on you to preserve them for me. Right? I will do my best to raise my child with iman. I will do my best to teach them. I will spend my resources in order to, develop their iman. But I'm not going to be with this child day in, day out. Most of the time, the child is not going to be under my eyes. And so I depend on you to take care of the rest. Right? Yeah. Hold on just one second here. Let's go ahead and I'll stop here and we'll continue from this point next time. بإذن الله تعالى. صلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.